Good morning. It is a Sunday morning, a little after 7. And I couldn't, the little 5-year-old was just roaming around the house already because now that he's going to school, he wakes up really early. He doesn't, being 5, he doesn't get that it's a weekend and he can sleep in. So I just got in the car. I went outside to record on my porch, and immediately there was like all this noise. It's 7 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday. There's all this noise. So I just got in my car and I drove to the nearest park thinking I'd be all alone. But 2 cars followed me. I guess they're meeting to go walking or something. Anyway, so I hope no one comes by and interrupts me. But I just wanted a few minutes of peace to be able to talk about Henry IV Part 1, which I finished for Shaktember. And I saw a little bit of the recording of the discussion that Rainey of Rainey Reads, Lukash of, what's the name of his channel? I'm drawing a blank. But Lukash, you know Lukash. And then Jason of Blues Chapter and Verse. And I only saw a few minutes of it. And then I decided I'm not going to watch this whole thing because I hadn't quite finished the play. So I wanted to finish the play and get my own thoughts together before watching what they had to say. So this was my first time reading Henry IV Part 1. And I had, like I said before, I was really familiar with Henry V, which alludes to Henry IV. So I always knew that I was missing something. And in Henry V, Falstaff dies, like pretty early on in the play. And I had heard of the character of Falstaff, but I never really knew him because I hadn't read the Henry IV plays, which is where he figures heavily. And you know what? I was not impressed by Falstaff. Maybe it's because I've been hearing about him all my life. Now he's this great character that Shakespeare developed and created. But I didn't really like him. Like, I thought he was supposed to be lovable, but I didn't find him lovable at all. I found him gross, kind of repulsive, and, he's not a good person. So I don't know, I miss that, just sort of like, ooh, I just didn't get all the love of Falstaff because he's despicable. He's actually a really despicable person. So I didn't get that. But anyway, just in brief, what this play is about is Henry IV is now king. He was the one in Richard II who took over the throne, who had led a coup, a civil war, and claimed the throne and had Richard II killed. And so he's been on his throne for a while, but he's really insecure about his legitimacy, of course. And that makes him, I think, overly harsh in dealing with any sort of perceived disrespect or disobedience to him. He's kind of heavy-handed, you get the feeling? And there's lots of civil war going on. There's a lot of rumbling in his kingdom. And not only does he have that problem, but his oldest son, Prince Harry, or Prince Hal, he goes by both, his name Henry, he is not the son that he would like to have. He's a youth who spends his time hanging out with these lowlifes in the Boar's Head Tavern, where they drink and they're prostitutes. And although that's implied rather than state it right out, and they're like petty thieves. Like they plan to rob people and stuff, and Prince Hal has this relationship with Falstaff where he's sort of, to me, it was like he had a strained, people are walking their dogs. There's a whole group of people walking their dogs here. There is no privacy in the world in the suburbs. Beautiful dogs, though. There's a beautiful Akita. Well, this guy's off leash. There's a Labrador off leash. Anyway, there's no place I can go. See, I should have been a hermit. I should be living out in the woods. I just want to be alone. Oh, I see. They use this field here in this park to be off leash, running around. It's like a dog club. That's neat. If I ever get another dog, I'll see. It's all men. It's all men with dogs. Anyway, Okay, never mind about that. So where was I? Oh yeah. So anyway, so Prince Hal is just spending his life hanging out with these low lives, doing these bad things. And he knows that he's doing these bad things. He knows it, and he knows that one day he's going to have to leave it behind and become a prince. You know, he's going to have to live up to his responsibilities. But in the meantime, he's got this weird relationship going on with Falstaff. Falstaff is this older man who I'm wondering if he isn't like sort of a alternative father figure, because Henry IV is so stern and preoccupied with his kingdom, and they don't have the best father-son relationship. And so here's this other guy who's this knight. Falstaff is a knight, but there's lots and lots of fat jokes. He's overweight because he's a glutton. He drinks sack, or wine all the time, so he's a drunkard. I think he frequents prostitutes. And he's a thief. Like, he doesn't have any conscience. He's completely, whatever he wants, Falstaff manipulates to get. So he's not a good person, but how they have this kind of playful relationship in a way, but it's also got this undercurrent of being mean. They play like mean pranks on each other, especially Hal on Falstaff, because Falstaff's older, but he is witty in his own way, but he's no match for Prince Hal, who's smart, and he's royal, right? He's the next in line. So Prince Hal plays these kind of mean tricks on Falstaff, which, Falstaff isn't a nice person anyway, so it's not like there's, that's all that bad to do. But still, it's a weird relationship, and I didn't get it. To me, the whole thing going on with Falstaff was showing what was wrong with Prince Hal, how immature he was being and how selfish he could be, and how he was just doing it for fun and almost like a little power play. And so it's not the best. It's not bringing out the best in Prince Hal, right? The thing that I liked the most about the play was how Shakespeare compared these two youths. So there's two Henrys. Well, there's a lot of Henrys. There's Henry the King, but then there's Prince Hal, who's a Henry, and then there's this other guy, Henry Percy. Now, the Percy family had helped Henry IV to power, but they felt like he hadn't shown enough gratitude to them, and that he'd sort of forgotten them. And so there's the son, was the father Mortimer? I think the father's Mortimer, and then the son was called Hotspur. His name is Henry Percy, and Shakespeare makes Henry Percy and Prince Henry the same age. So my husband told me that in real life, Henry Percy was a real person, but he was 10 years older. But he makes them the same age. And they're both young. And so to me, he was comparing these two young men and how they could have been brothers. Like, just their characteristics, he was playing them off against each other. So Prince Henry is like living this wastrel life where he's being really irresponsible. And Henry Percy, or Hotspur as he's known, is very ambitious and driven. And he's called Hotspur because he's very impatient and he's quick to anger. He's got a very hot temper. And people are always trying to calm him down. But on the other hand, they take him seriously because he is such a smart, ambitious guy. And so so he's already married. He's a commander. People take him seriously, whereas with Prince Hal, he's just seen as sort of a disappointment, and he's more immature, and he's not married, he's not doing anything to really help his father. So we see, through the course of the play, we see what happens to them. It goes back and forth. So Henry realizes that there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes on in the tavern, and there's these jokes that they're playing on each other, and Falstaff and a couple other guys rob some people, but then Prince Henry and what's the Poins, another guy from the tavern who seems to be kind of, I don't know, a little bit closer to. They dress up and they rob Falstaff and the other guys, and then it all comes out. Falstaff tells these big, fishing tales about how he fought off 20 people or whatever, and it was really just Prince Hal and the other one dressed up. Anyway, and then Prince Hal calls him out on his lies, and it's a big laugh. So all that's going on, but in the meantime, you see Hotspur planning this rebellion, because what happened was Hotspur fought this battle with the Scots, and but he wouldn't give his prisoners to King Henry IV, which is what you were supposed to do, because he's got this chip on his shoulder that King Henry IV has not been grateful enough for their help, hasn't acknowledged it, or treated them specially because of that. And so he's refusing to give up his prisoners. And so King Henry, being heavy-handed about it because he's insecure about his kingdom, just makes the breach even greater. And then Hotspur goes off and he's conspiring with the Welsh and with the Scots to take the kingdom from Henry IV. And so he's off planning that sort of stuff, and he's off with his wife planning it. And so he's not planning it with his wife. His wife is he doesn't want to tell her. Anyway, so it's just a comparison of the two men and how the young men, how they mature. And Hotspur is too rash, it turns out, because things start to fall apart for the rebellion. First, his father is sick and can't bring his men. Then they find out that the Welsh leader can't come for another 14 days, but they've decided it's too late. And then Prince Henry and Henry IV try to negotiate a peace beforehand, but one of the guys doesn't tell Hotspur about it because he thinks it's too late for that. And so what you see is Hotspur is sort of damning himself. The very thing that people were sort of cautioning about but also admired about him was sort of led to his doom. Whereas with Prince Henry or Hal or Harry, you see him, he always knew he had to break away from Falstaff and everything. He knew that he was going to have to do it. In a way, he was just sort of using them. But you see him saying, okay, I have to reconcile with my father, and this is the tipping point. So with this rebellion, he reconciles with his father, whereas Hotspur is too quick to go into battle. Henry, you find, is behind, and he actually commissions Falstaff to have his own troop, and that troop, this is where, to me, Falstaff is really evil. He deliberately picks people that are never going to make it on the battlefield. Like, they're just broken, poor, half-starved people with no, they're not smart, they're not trained, and they're all going to die, and somehow he's going to get their money or something. It's just truly despicable. It's just greedy, despicable, using people. So he's a terrible knight. There's nothing noble about this guy. Anyway, so Henry's late. He gets there later, but he winds up. The neat thing that Shakespeare does is they wind up but the Hotspur and Harry wind up having a sword fight. Now, Prince Harry had wanted to do one-on-one combat, but that was what was rejected with Hotspur. But they wind up having it anyway. They're fighting on the field, and Prince Harry kills Hotspur, which you don't know why. I saw the Hollow Crown, and they had to sort of set it up in a really dramatic way, but you could really interpret it different ways, I think, that scene. But anyway, so then, and what was really neat was Shakespeare did was they really could have been brothers. Like, Prince Harry really admired Hotspur. and wished he was more like him. And Hotspur did not admire Prince Harry because he had heard these, rumors about him, about how he's just living this life of drunkenness and petty crime and that sort of thing. And so he's really surprised when Henry kills him, stabs him, and he realizes he's dying. And as he dies, he leaves a sentence half spoken, and Prince Henry finishes it. So Hotspur dies, and Henry actually finishes his sentence. So you just get the sense that, wow, they could have been like brothers. They could have been really good friends, like bosom buddies, but they didn't, and it's almost like they're like flip sides of what it means to grow up and be this responsible leader, at that time. So I thought that was really interesting. I really thought that was the most interesting part of the play. The other despicable thing that Falstaff does is Prince Harry has killed Hotspur, and he goes off with his younger brother. And meanwhile, Falstaff was there, and he was fighting with some other guy. And but the other guy runs away because of something. I can't remember now. But Falstaff pretends he's dead. So Prince Harry thinks that Falstaff is also dead. After he's killed Hotspur, he thinks that Falstaff is also dead. Falstaff is faking it. So he goes off thinking he's killed Hotspur and that Falstaff is dead. But then Falstaff doesn't wake up. He gets up from pretending he's dead, and he goes over and he basically says, I'll pretend that I killed Hotspur. So he stabs him, and then he lifts up the body and he carries him, and he says, I would. And so when he runs into Prince Harry again, he tells this whole lie about how, he was pretending he was dead, and so was Hotspur, and that he got up and he and Hotspur had this big fight, and he was the one that really killed Hotspur. And Prince Henry realizes, that he's lying. First he can't understand what happened, and then he says, you're lying. And then he says, you know what, I'll let you get away with it. It's just, it's part of their relationship with each other. And so but that is Falstaff. Ugh, I didn't like him at all. So anyway, that's my opinion of Henry IV. I'm glad I finally got to it. I mean, all my life I've been hearing about Falstaff. Finally read about it, but I was underwhelmed by Falstaff. I just didn't find him. I didn't find him funny. I just found him repulsive and sneaky and a liar. And there was nothing lovable about him. Even their relationship, I thought it was brought out the worst in Prince Harry, and so anyway. But I did like the play. But I have to say, Richard II had such beautiful passages in it, and I really felt so much for Richard II that in this one it's more of a swashbuckling tale with, comedy thrown in there from the Boar's Head Tavern. But Richard II was more of a real tragedy, I thought. So I found that play more compelling than this one, even though this one apparently is extremely popular. But at the end, King Henry and Prince Harry win the day, and they've at least for now, put down the rebellion. Now, this is just part 1, so I have to see what happens in part 2. Anyway, and I'm going to try and read that this week. So, all right, I cannot seem to get under 19 minutes, so sorry this is so long. All right, I hope it makes sense, too. Anyway, I hope you're doing well, and happy reading. Bye.